My name is Victoria Sanders. I'm 35 years old, and for the past decade, I've lived alone in a quiet condo tucked just outside of Denver. I work as a senior operations strategist for a national supply chain firm, the kind of job that demands constant problem solving brutal hours and a spine of steel. It's not glamorous, but I earned every inch of it without shortcuts, without support, and definitely without family. I haven't spoken to my mother or her husband Greg since I was 17. So when I heard the knock that afternoon, loud, sharp, entitled, I knew even before checking the peephole that something was about to unravel. I opened the door slowly, and there they stood, my mother dressed like she'd walked off a magazine shoot, and Greg arms folded like he owned the place. No call, no text, no apology, just that smug, practiced smile. Victoria, my mother said like we had brunch last weekend. We need to talk. Before I could respond, Greg pushed past me and entered my home like it still belonged to him. My mother followed, glancing around with faux curiosity. I didn't invite them to sit. I didn't ask how they were. I didn't even shut the door. We heard about your promotion, Greg began. Regional director. That's impressive. You must be doing quite well for yourself. My eyes narrowed, but I said nothing. So here's the thing, my mother added. Your stepbrother Jason is struggling. His tuition, his car. Well, we thought maybe you could help. Help! That word landed like a slap. They'd cut me off emotionally and financially the moment she married Greg. I was 17, working 2 jobs, sleeping on couches to get through college. I never got a dime from them. But now that I had built a life on my own, suddenly I was useful again. If you've ever had someone who abandoned you show up out of nowhere expecting kindness, I want you to hit yes in the comments. And subscribe because this story only gets colder from here. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, letting the silence do what words couldn't cut. Greg kept talking, oblivious to the weight of his own arrogance. Jason's a good kid. He just needs a little help getting started. And with your income, it's not like it would be a big deal. My mother added, He's your brother Victoria. Family helps family. Family! That word felt like acid. When I was 17 and lost my financial aid because of a paperwork glitch, I called her crying, desperate, begging for help. She told me she and Greg were prioritizing their new responsibilities. And then she hung up. That was the last conversation we had. I paid my way through school by cleaning offices at night and delivering groceries during the day. I lived off canned soup and hope. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, not because I was hungry or exhausted, but because I realized no one was coming to save me. And now they had the audacity to stand in my living room and ask for a check, like I owed them. I took a deep breath, calm but steel-lined. You didn't help me when I needed you. I was just a mistake you swept aside to start over. So why now? My mother flinched, but Greg scoffed. Don't be dramatic. You turned out fine, didn't you? That's when I knew. This wasn't guilt. This was convenience. I had value again, not as a daughter, but as a wallet. If you agree, Greg said, pulling out a printed bank form, we can get this sorted before Friday. Jason's tuition is overdue. I stared at the paper. Then I laughed. Not politely, not nervously. I laughed from the gut, loud and sharp. Get out! I didn't need to yell. The firmness in my voice cut cleaner than any scream. Before they left, my mother turned, her voice shaking. You'll regret this. I met her eyes. No, you will. If you've ever had someone betray you, then expect your help like nothing happened. Drop a yes in the comments and subscribe, because I haven't even told you the worst part yet. What they did next still makes my blood boil. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from guilt. No, that ship had sailed decades ago, but from the thundering storm of memories they had reignited. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering the way my mother used to braid my hair before school, whispering promises of forever. And then I remembered the way she stood beside Greg the night they told me to leave. No warning, no emotion. Just a calm, calculated decision to cut me out and start over with their real family. I was 17. No job, no backup plan, just a borrowed duffel bag and a bus pass my guidance counselor gave me. I lived in a basement apartment with moldy walls and no heat, but I made it work. I built something out of the scraps they left me. And now they expected me to pretend none of that happened, to write a check because their golden child hadn't applied for scholarships? No, I wouldn't rewrite history for their convenience. But the worst wasn't the request, it was what came after I said no. 2 days later, I received a text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. Heard you're too rich to help your family. Harsh. My stomach dropped. Within hours, I was getting tagged on Facebook in cryptic posts. Some people forget who raised them. Success really changes people. It was a smear campaign, subtle but calculated. My mother and Greg were painting me as cold, selfish, ungrateful. I blocked their accounts, but not before I saw the post that broke me a photo of Jason holding a cardboard sign that read, "Family first, unless you're Victoria." Dozens of likes. Comments pouring in. I was the villain now. The one who made it and forgot everyone else. But here's what none of them knew: I had receipts. Literal ones. Bank statements from when I paid off Mom's past due medical bills behind the scenes. Proof that I sent birthday money for Jason for 5 years until he started returning it. I never wanted credit. I just wanted peace. But if they were going to rewrite the narrative, I was ready to write, mine louder, bolder, and this time with the truth at the center. I thought I'd be angry. I thought I'd draft a furious email post, screenshots of the bank transfers, expose every sacrifice I made that they conveniently forgot. But instead, I poured myself a cup of black coffee, sat at my kitchen island, and stared at the silence that used to feel like loneliness. Now it felt like armor. The truth didn't need shouting. It just needed living. Still, I couldn't pretend it didn't hurt being branded as heartless by the very people who abandoned me without flinching. What haunted me more than the betrayal was the eerie calm with which they orchestrated it all. It wasn't just a moment of desperation. It was manipulation rehearsed to perfection. 3 days later, my assistant buzzed me. "There's a woman downstairs. Says she's your aunt." I hadn't heard that word in years. Aunt Leslie, my mother's younger sister. She used to sneak me snacks during family dinners, whispering that I deserved better. I hadn't seen her since my high school graduation. I met her in the lobby, and she looked older, wearier, but still had that same spark in her eyes. "They're spreading lies, Victoria," she said, cutting right to it. "And you don't deserve it." Her voice cracked. "I kept quiet too long. I saw what they did. I saw how they erased you. And just like that, I wasn't alone. We went to lunch, and for the first time in a long time, someone from that side of the family acknowledged the truth. She told me about the birthday parties. I was never invited to the family group chats, where my name was a punchline, the way my mother pretended I had chosen a different path. No one asked why I wasn't there. No one asked how I was doing, because they didn't want to know. It was easier to make me the villain than face what they allowed to happen. But now I wasn't just a footnote in their story. I had my own. And it was time I told it, not out of spite, but to take back what they tried to bury. My voice, my truth, my place. After my lunch with Aunt Leslie, I didn't rush to react. I sat with everything she told me, letting it settle like dust after a storm. The silence, the rejection, the false stories. They weren't just acts of cruelty. They were choices. Calculated, repeated, and wrapped in the thinnest veil of family loyalty. I went home that night and pulled out the folder I kept tucked in the back of my closet, my private archive. It held copies of every wire transfer, every email, every unopened card I'd mailed over the years. Evidence that I had tried, that I had reached out when they hadn't deserved it, that I had been the better person. And now it was time to stop being silent. But I didn't plan revenge. I planned clarity. That weekend, I published an article on a personal blog I hadn't touched in years. The title, "When Family is the First Betrayal." I didn't name names. I didn't post screenshots. I just told the truth, the story of a girl pushed out for being inconvenient, who built a life from nothing, only to be summoned years later, like an ATM with emotions. I ended it with one sentence. Sometimes the hardest person to stand up to is the one who gave you life. I went to bed not expecting much. By morning, the post had gone viral. Hundreds of comments. Messages from strangers saying, "This is my story." People who had been cast out, cut off, made to feel small for the sake of someone else's comfort. I wasn't alone. I never had been. I just hadn't known where the others were. The next day, a reporter reached out, then a podcast host, then a woman from a nonprofit that helps teens aging out of foster care. Your story has power, she said. Want to do something with it? For the first time, I saw purpose in the pain. My past wasn't a wound anymore. It was a bridge. They tried to shame me into silence. Instead, they gave me a microphone. And now, I wasn't just healing. I was helping others do the same. And I was just getting started. With the momentum of that viral post doors, I never imagined started opening. Invitations to speak at conferences, to share my experience with college students, to collaborate on campaigns about emotional abuse and generational trauma. I wasn't just a forgotten daughter anymore, I was a voice for people who'd been erased by those who were supposed to protect them. But with visibility came something else: exposure. One afternoon, I got a message on LinkedIn. From my mother. We need to talk. This has gone too far. The audacity nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. Gone too far. That phrase rattled around in my head like a bad echo. She hadn't thought it went too far when she let her husband push me out at 16, when she refused to co-sign my loan, when she posted family Christmas pictures for a decade without me in a single frame. But now that people were listening, now that her image was dented, it was suddenly too far. Shocked. This time, I wasn't the one who would shrink. I crafted a simple reply. I told the truth. And I'm finally done hiding. I hit send without a second thought. Days later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address. Her handwriting instantly recognizable. It started with, "I didn't know how much I hurt you," but quickly spiraled into a list of justifications. How hard things had been for her. How Steve was just trying his best. How I should have reached out sooner. I read every word and felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just distance. A cold, quiet distance that let me know I'd finally outgrown the need for her validation. That night, I sat on the floor of my apartment, surrounded by candlelight and my laptop, and I wrote back, not to her, but to everyone like me. I wrote, "You don't owe anyone access to your peace. Not even if they share your blood. Especially not if they've shattered your trust. If you're still reading this and nodding along, comment yes, and don't forget to subscribe. Because people like us, we're not broken. We're rebuilding, stronger, wiser, and no longer willing to beg for love that should have been freely given." I never did hear back after that final message. No calls, no letters, no apologies. Just silence, clean, absolute silence. And for the first time in my life, that silence didn't ache. It felt like freedom. I stopped checking the mailbox with a knot in my stomach. I stopped wondering if they'd ever acknowledge what they did, because I realized something far more powerful than closure. I didn't need their remorse to move on. Peace isn't about fixing broken relationships. Sometimes it's about building something beautiful in their absence. I started mentoring young women from foster care programs, helping them navigate scholarships and college life. Every time I looked into one of their eyes and said, "You're not alone," I meant it with every fiber of my being. Because I had been them. Lost, unseen, but no more. I chose to give what I never received: support, without strings, love, without judgment, and guidance, without guilt. My apartment is still quiet, but now that quiet is filled with peace, not tension. The candles still flicker in the evenings. My journals are no longer filled with pain, but with gratitude and goals. I don't wonder what could have been anymore. I live in what is, and it's mine. My life, my choices, my boundaries. So if you've ever had to choose yourself over your family, if you've ever walked away from the people who were supposed to love, you know this: you're not selfish, you're brave, you're healing, and you're not alone anymore. Drop a comment if this story reached a part of you no one else sees. Share it with someone who needs the reminder. And subscribe, because sometimes the most powerful revenge is not revenge at all. It's becoming everything they said you couldn't be, and choosing peace anyway. See